To MySecTV and our Tech and Sec Weekly. My name's Chris Cubbage. I'm the editor with MySecurity Media, and this is our Friday morning episode. And we are joined by Anna Leibel and Claire Pales on their book launch, The Secure Board. Sorry, just to start that off, The Secure Board. And very pleased to welcome Claire back. Claire was with us, I think, at the end of last year as well. So we have had her on before. It's always a great achievement to release a new book. This is her second book. So we'll bring the authors, Anna and Claire, on very shortly. Just to walk through what we've been doing and what we've got coming up, we cover on aerospace and space, defence and national security, cybersecurity and critical technology, and cities and infrastructure. We will be streaming on YouTube, LinkedIn, and on Facebook. And we'll also release this one out as a cybersecurity weekly podcast. And we're not limited. We've only got Anna and Claire on with us this morning, so we'll go for at least 30 minutes, if not a little longer, walking through the Secure Board. Just what we've got coming up next Tuesday, we're going to do something slightly different. We're going to look at, being the end of March, we're going to look at Q1 2021 for a market review. We'll look at the video surveillance sector, and we'll also have a look at the space and defence sector, just what's been happening in those two domains as we kicked off 2021. Then we go into the Easter break, and then we return on April the 6th. And I've lined up about 5 tech series from Israel. So having a look at some Israeli tech. Then we'll continue with our Indo-Pacific series, and around about May, we'll be introducing a new security consultant series as well. We've got a couple of sponsors coming on board for that. Just back from Tuesday, we looked at the Resilient Multi-Mission Space Program with Rod Smith, the Starshot leader. They're part of the Defence Science and Technology Group. Very, very interesting in terms of what the roadmap is for the Australian space sector and also defence. Resilient being the key word there. So check that one out. And then we looked at drone detection integrated with a compliance and risk management system with Jonathan King and Lee Croft from AVCRM and Department 13. Also quite interesting, particularly on how two systems come together, but also the drone detection market also. Women in Security ASEAN region going quite well. I checked the nominations coming in yesterday, so we're approaching the half century on that one, so going quite strong. So if you know women in security within the ASEAN nations, please encourage them to nominate, or just go ahead and nominate them for their good work and contribution. And speaking of women in security in ASEAN, our Singapore correspondent just sent this through yesterday. I haven't had a chance to listen to this, but this will come out on Monday. This is with Professor Nasir Memon, and he is with the Centre for Cybersecurity and Tandon School of Engineering, NYU, looking at deep fakes, seeing is believing. And if you've been following Jane's work in some of her recent interviews, no doubt that's a cracker. So looking forward to listening to that. Also out is our Cyber Risk Leaders magazine, going quite well, and there's about 20 odd articles in there. So please take the time to view that. That's on the marketplace. And thank you to our sponsors, RSA and their RSA Secure ID Suite. This month we've been with ALC and their cybersecurity certification courses. We've also had the ATO promoting their cybersecurity jobs and roles, both junior and senior roles. So please check that one out. That's ato.gov.au/jobs. And then also next month, we're starting with our SCADA and ICS cybersecurity courses. So please check that out, and the registrations have started to come in for that. If you want to support the channel, we do have a merchandise, mysecurity.shop. Got a range of sort of T-shirts, anything cyber related. Merchandise will start to add to that. We've got our own series, our Cyber War series, with the panda, the Russian bear, and the Indian tiger. So please check them out. And yeah, not too bad at all. They wash quite well. That's the main thing with the T-shirt. So look, without further ado, I'm going to bring in Claire Pales and Anna Leibel, the authors of The Secure Board. Ladies, thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, thanks so much for having us.
Good morning. Thank you.
Great. Look, congratulations. We didn't really get a chance of a pre-interview sort of discussion, so we've got a lot to unpack with a new book, but congratulations on the new book, and Claire, your second one, so that's quite an achievement.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I'm looking forward to having a chat today.
Good on you. Okay, so let's start with the background to the book, and I like the way you are branding this as well. So maybe talk about your relationship first on how you've come together, because Claire, we've had you on before, and you've got a podcast. You've rebranded your podcast show as well. Now you're out with a new book, very very nice and polished, I will say that, and it's also a great message. Let's start with you maybe on the sort of the journey to a second book, the partnership with Anne, and then beg your pardon, Anna, and then we'll sort of move into the book. And just for the audience listening, we do have a book giveaway. There's 3 issues to give away, so stay tuned, and we'll walk through how you can get a copy.
Sure, thanks, Chris. So Anna and I met about 15 years ago. We were both working at Telstra, and we met at a speed networking event. Long before social media, when we could get together in person. And Anna and I met there. We hit it off. We met lots of people that day, but obviously we've stayed in touch while our careers have gone in many different directions. I've lived overseas. We've come back together. And a couple of years ago, we first talked about this book. And then just last year, sort of late in the year, Anna and I came back together and discussed the opportunity to write the Secure Board. And for me, yes, it is my second book. My first book was very focused on technology leaders and their responsibility around cyber, not only to protect an organisation and their critical data, but also to hire a really great cybersecurity leader that fits the maturity of the organisation. So that was the first book. I wrote that back in 2017. And then as my business has evolved, I spoke to Anna about her time as a director on boards and her time as a technology leader, and the opportunity to bring her experience and my experience together and write a book that was very business focused and take away the technology concern about cyber for directors and really write this book where we could provide a business lens and an easy to understand approach to cybersecurity for board directors. And I don't know if you want to add anything to the journey to date.
Go, Anna. Yeah.
I think the only other piece of interest is that after Claire and I met 15 years ago, she actually invited me to join her book club. So we did spend a few years doing that as well. And so it's I find it interesting that we've come together to write the book, given that we've obviously got a passion for reading as well.
Well, you mentioned reading. I was going to say writing. How did you come about structuring it? Because I tend to, and a few other authors have you tend to write articles and you write, and then before you know it, you've got 10, 20,000 words. You go, okay, I've got to put a book here if I put it all together. And it looks very structured like that. It is laid out as if you've planned it and then you've written it, rather than you've kind of been writing along the way. And the other one I really wanted to say is that it's quite current and contemporary, particularly for the Australian market. So it's very written for the Australian board director. You're both members of the Australian Institute of Company Directors and Graduates, as I am as well. So it does, that course from the AICD does change your thinking and get you understanding how board directors think. And they are a unique beast, so to speak. You do have to talk to them because they're very focused and they do think differently to, say, executives and sort of managerial teams. And maybe, Anna, I'll bring that to you, of how you've adjusted the book to a board director here in Australia. It seems to be quite written for that very niche market.
Thanks, Chris. So the book, actually, we started the book having a general idea of what the business problem or the problem that we were trying to solve. Yep. And that was really our observations, having worked with boards. And I also work as an executive at UniSuper in superannuation, so have had a lot of exposure to the board over the past 4 years in that sector. And then we actually went about undertaking research. So we did a lot of research with board members, with chief executives, with CI leaders themselves. And what that actually did was validated a lot of our hypothesis, but also added more content, I suppose, around where board members in particular to understand the risk of cyber, and then also what management was doing to manage and address that risk. What we also learned from security leaders is I suppose they were asking them, and where their focus was lying. So that's actually how we went about designing the book. We've structured it in 5 elements because we're really intending it to be read, or basically based on the upcoming board agenda, you can pick up the book and read one element at a time. So if your security leader was bringing the cyber strategy to your next board meeting, you could actually pick the book up and just read that element. But you can also read the book in its entirety. And as you mentioned, it is a very contemporary book. We're very intentionally not put in a lot of jargon, as we find that that's actually quite daunting for board members. And that was one of the things that was validated through our research.
And it's very risk orientated as well, and that's how you've approached it with boards. Have you found in your experience, and it's great to see these types of books, these are very, very important. We published Jermaine Tan's book on the cyber risk leaders and, a C-suite insights, and Peter Corcoran also came out with one on the playbook. So these are really important. It really does bring to the surface sort of not so much the complexity, but the importance when books are being written for boards and the issues that they are facing. It's just adds to that sort of contemporary discussion and gets them to think about it, particularly when new books are coming out all the time. Were you finding, it sounds like you were, but were you finding that boards are struggling with it, or they're just not taking it on board because there's so many other risk issues that they are facing with? What is the barrier, do you think, there for boards? Is it too complex? Do they just assume it's technical?
Chris, I think that part of the challenge for boards is that the areas that they've governed more traditionally don't really change. Overseeing the financials doesn't really shift. And what's really evolving now is a new non-financial risks, and they're examples like climate change and also cyber. And so I do think it's actually broadening out the accountabilities of a board member, but also the skills that they need to have. And I suppose more focus on continuous learning. So really staying up to date with the emerging risks and emerging issues for businesses. And then layering it on top of that, I think it's the implications of a breach that are so daunting. So the reputational, financial and regulatory implications of a breach are very significant. And so I think it's definitely just the size of the risk, the severity of it, and how technical it can be in nature. And then I also think some boards are still seeing this as a tech issue. So an issue that technology alone can solve. Whereas the book really does focus on this being an enterprise-wide issue and responsibility that really needs to have a lot of focus from the chief executive, and it needs to be on the board.
Well, I've actually pulled out a quote in element 1, and we'll come back to the elements versus the chapters, but I think you've explained that in terms of this is a book, it's almost not a playbook, but it's a reference book. You can continue. It's a sort of a body of work and a body of knowledge that they can go to. But it's cyber is a business risk, not an IT problem. If we only look at cyber as an IT problem, then our peer directors, stakeholders, and employee community will continue to believe it only warrants an IT response. And again, it's something we've, I won't say banged on about, but we continue to see in that. And I actually like the opening of the book. And Claire, I mean, I wrote, I did a thesis, an honours thesis, 2005, and you talked about sort of the corporate governance and security. So I was trying to sort of bring these two together back then even. And you talked about, I can't remember the company now, I don't have it in front of me, just the opening chapter where, was it Ansett or HIH? HIH, wasn't it? And where you talked about the issues around corporate governance, just generally introducing that corporate governance. Directors have a responsibility to manage risk. And I will say, I won't sort of bag the AICD, but at the time I did my course, they were of the view that if you don't know the risk, then you don't need to manage it. Sometimes it's better not to know the risk. And I'm like, excuse me, no, I don't think that's quite the issue. And they ended up in a discussion. So that corporate governance aspect is a very interesting sort of approach to take when they have to manage security and cybersecurity. What were your sort of thoughts and experiences around that sort of area?
So Anna and I, as Anna explained, we did plan out the book and spent actually probably more time planning it than writing it, just trying to get it right. Were we writing the right book at the right time for the right audience? And that was really important to us to make sure that we got that right. And then considering how to open the book, because that's where you have to get your reader hooked in. So, you know, the opening of the book talks about the fact that many moons ago, as a director, it was okay to come in with the skills that you had and apply those skills. Whereas these days, there is so much change going on in the world. Who would have known we'd spend 2020 in a pandemic? Who would have known that cybersecurity was going to become a director level responsibility? Climate change, you know, as Anna mentioned, there's so much coming at directors now that, you know, I guess we wanted to open the book with a reminder that this is an ever evolving role and that directors can't sit still and I guess expect others on the board to take responsibility for some of these more what's perceived as more technical roles. But, you know, risk is risk. And when we do explain in the book that we want directors to feel comfortable that if they can manage risk, then, you know, 70% of this, they already have the knowledge to do. It's just that other 30% where they need to get some subject matter expertise around cyber. And so Anna and I took the opportunity to explain, as you said, in 5 elements that we think is a really great starting point. That the book is not everything you need to know about cyber, absolutely not an exhaustive list, but these 5 elements that we've put into the book are really about helping directors at a starting point. You know, this book is great for CISOs as well, on the flip side, to understand, you know, where board directors' thinking is at. And what we discovered through our research was that board directors are really focused on the strategy because that's where they can apply their current thinking. But directors can also apply their current thinking to the risk as well. And
well, I was going to say, I think they get a bit, I mean, it's human nature. They get a bit lazy. They go in with what's comfortable and they are very strategic and, you know, just give me a simple decision to make. I don't want to have to think about it. It should be a sort of a no-brainer for me. And I think you're right. They're facing so much. They put the blinkers on purpose because it would be overwhelming sometimes if they did consider all the risk. And we've seen that, you know, recently, even with a board like Crown, with internal money laundering with their highest risk, but they still miss it. And we've seen that across, there's so many different examples. I think the moment you start looking at corporate governance and the failures of boards, cybersecurity is just one of various, many that they do. And it's really it's a kind of a passion for me because I've always sort of struggled to understand how they can be like that. But I do understand it's a human nature. Now, I suppose what I did like about it, apart from I went to the references and you've referenced the Australian Cybersecurity magazine, so very clap for that because we obviously published that and I was quite chuffed with that. I didn't know that before. But you've got some good reviews here as well. And you mentioned your ex-Telstra. You got Darren Kane, who's written a review for you. He's the Chief Security Officer at the NBN. And Michael Gordon, AM, lawyer and board director, Chair Alfred Health, Senior Principal Russell Kennedy Lawyers. And importantly, you've got the foreword is David Thodey, AO, Chair of the CSIRO. And your introduction is by Ken Lay, AO, APM. He's a fellow of the AICD, Lieutenant Governor of Victoria, Board Chairperson and Director. Maybe talk us through that kind of the challenge of getting people to read the book, review it, choosing your foreword and your introduction. These are obviously a network of people for you. Yeah, just talk us through that process because that's a critical part of the book process. Maybe Anna.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Chris. We're extremely proud to have David write the foreword and Ken to prepare the introduction for us. And we think that they both bring a very different dynamic to the book. David's obviously got a technical background, his time at IBM and as CEO at Telstra, and now as the chair of CSIRO, and he's also the chair of Xero as well. Right. But that was really important to Claire and I as that connection back that we met at Telstra. We worked under his leadership when he was the chief executive. So that's got more of a personal connection as well as the obviously large professional role that he plays across the tech sector today in a board capacity. And then Ken obviously plays a really strong role across the community as his role or previous role as the police commissioner, and now working across Ambulance Victoria and the other roles that he does that really help our community. And his introduction to the book actually talks more about the continuous learning and education as a board member. And so we were thrilled to have both of them participate in that, but also the testimonials that we've been able to share from other business leaders
Very good.
that
And
we're
it
able to get
sounds
an
like
early copy of the book.
Sorry, and it does sound like you've worked with some of those reviewers as well, which is a nice touch. And I think that brings us back to the sort of the business approach and the branding around the book as well. Maybe just discuss sort of the business approach. This is an ongoing sort of advisory approach, and I think it's really good to be able to walk in and as a consultant or an advisor and go, hey, read my book, and then that's got a body of knowledge for you that I've got. What's the status with you two now? Because I imagine as this gets distributed around and sold, the phone's going to start to ring hot, and is that the approach here as well?
Do you want to take that, Anna, or do you want me?
No, Claire, go. You go. Your turn.
So yes, so absolutely, Anna and I are committed to getting the word out there about our book, and the book is the starting point. It's 100 pages. It's really approachable read, and we made sure that we used language that we were receiving when we did our research. We didn't want to make it a read where they got 20 pages in and thought this is far too deep. It's more about an introduction to the topic. And then as consultants, Anna and I can certainly provide additional expertise and advisory around this topic. And, I guess it's a bit funny to say that between us, we have 45 years experience in cyber and technology, but, we're really coming at this from our own experience as well as the experience of our peers. And, some of the people that wrote testimonials for us have been a really big part of our learnings across our careers. So the ability for us to then work with boards who might read the book or hear about the book, and really there might be an element or two elements of it that they want to delve deeper in, we can come to them and provide them with that expertise and that hand-holding. And, the idea of the book, as you can see from the tagline, this is about building confidence. We don't expect directors to be technology professionals and have a deep technical understanding. This is about them building confidence to ask questions, and some of which we provide in the book, but then understand the answers. That's the really key part, not to be asking questions that they are really unsure about. Well, when the response comes back, can we process that in order to make a decision?
Well, that is the important point. The tagline is how to be confident your organisation is cyber safe. Now, we do have 3 copies to give away. If you are listening, welcome to say hello and let us know where you're listening from, or press like to share this out with your colleagues. We do have 3 books to give away, and the book is listed on the MySecurity Marketplace. That's mysecuritymarketplace.com. And there's 2 quotes. So you need to go find our bookstore on the marketplace. There's 2 quotes, and you need to tell us who those quotes are from, and email us the 2 names at promoteme@mysecuritymedia.com, and the first 3 responses will win a copy of the book. And if you happen to be doing that, press, if you put a comment in, I'll sort of hold that, and you can, as long as you follow up with the email. So the first 3 responses to promoteme@mysecuritymedia.com, tell us who those 2 quotes are from on the MySecurity Marketplace bookstore for the Secure Board. We'll continue on, and as Claire just raised, just the elements, and I'll just briefly walk through the 4 elements. Is it 4 or 5? 5. 5. Cyber is a business risk, not an IT problem. We've kind of touched on that, and that looks at taking a risk-based approach to governing cybersecurity and the importance of risk appetite statements. And then there's in the case of cyber risk treatment, it is risk mitigation, not elimination. Let's touch on these because we're okay with time. Do you think that's another area that boards might struggle with, where they try to either eliminate or transfer risk as well? They don't like having sort of risk on the risk register, and we've run a lot of roundtables, and I'm sure you guys have as well. It's a journey. Like cybersecurity is a hygiene. It's like maintaining your health. It's sometimes you have a sick day, you don't feel very well. That's just the normal part of life, and that's likewise with business. Sometimes it's a red flag if you don't have red risk indicators in a cybersecurity context, is something else that we've heard. How do you find that boards feel with that sort of risk mitigation, not elimination, and managing and understanding that there is a risk at any time? Is that something you think that they struggle with?
Chris, I think that there's a definite understanding around the risk of cyber, and that it needs to continue having the exposure But I think that where some board members are probably a bit more challenged is that the risk is not going to go away. And so it's an education piece around building out that cyber strategy. I think a critical element of the strategy is actually to be able to articulate what's going to be different once the strategy's been implemented. And part of that should be a shift in the risk, the current risk itself. But I also think then there's the education piece that unlike some other risks, investing money and uplifting capability and maturity in a space doesn't mean that that risk rating will actually go down. If anything, I see it more as trying to maintain the current risk rating. It might shift down a little bit, but I still think the risk should sit. I would naturally have it as a high risk, just because of the emerging threats. And we're really seeing that, not just the volume of them, but also the sophistication as well.
And what about different market verticals that you deal with? Is there any sort of trend to the boards that you tend to deal with? So it seems to be the health sector at the moment is struggling quite a bit, and it's often down to resources or attention to those, whereas others say maybe like the Telstras and the large banks don't seem to be struggling too much on a cyber. They sort of lead the pack, and it's that small and medium-sized enterprises here in Australia that really struggle. Did anything that fall out as you were writing the book as well, of, you know, the SMB side of the sector, and those, say an NFP board as well, like a not-for-profit, when they go, okay, there's a risk here, and are we managing it, and who's going to manage it? Where did that come from? And maybe link that into the role of a CISO and whether they need a CISO, how that kind of worked.
Yeah, look, I think certainly what I'm seeing through consulting has been, and I think Anna can attest to this from her work in financial services, is that most organisations are quite reactive to this. And as different industry verticals have become more and more regulated, they're far more likely to put security controls in place and to potentially have a CISO or a head of information security or a dedicated leader. And we talk in the book, one of our elements in the book is, you know, do you have a CISO? Do you need a CISO? But the bottom line is you need a dedicated leader in your organisation, whether it's a CISO or a lead or a head of or a technical person, somebody in the business who's flying the flag for security every day. And so from a regulatory perspective, financial services and communications, telecommunications, they have a much heavier regulatory burden at the moment than some other industries do. And moving away from verticals and to SMB, like you spoke of, the smaller the organisation, sometimes the less likely it is that they'll come under that regulated pressure, depending on their revenue or their or the scope of their business. And so having a regulator suggesting or requiring you to have certain controls in place is one thing, but having a mindset that the compliance is all you need is actually quite dangerous, because you need actually to have security measures in place and risk-based decisions made rather than just complying with the regulator requirements of your organisation. So I guess what I've found from consulting, but also through the research of the book, is there's different mechanisms that make organisations become more focused on cyber, but there's more laws coming. And, you know, yes, again, it will still be reactive, but it's important that these measures are put in place so that organisations can, you know, uplift. A rising tide lifts all boats. We can uplift the general hygiene across business for the protection of people's information.
And maybe another point on that is, what was the period of time writing this book? I might have missed that. If you've mentioned, it was a good couple of years.
No.
Lockdown.
COVID project.
Yeah, so Anna and I, as I mentioned before, we actually spent more time planning the book than we did writing it.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of research, both our own research, but looking to global trends as well.
Yeah.
And then in the same way that I wrote my first book, we wrote the book in 30 days. So 30,000 words in 30 days, and then off to the editor, which obviously takes a couple of iterations and quite a bit of work for both the editor and Anna and I to refine the book and make sure that we're getting it right. And so the actual writing process is kind of strictly within a month. It's the before and after part that take the additional time. So all up, Anna, do you think maybe 6 months, but the writing was just 1 month?
Okay. Well, I'm extremely impressed, somewhat jealous but it does show, I suppose, the planning that you must have really gone through, and then you've basically you built the skeleton and then just put the meat on at the end, which is probably why it's so well structured as well, in terms of as you really thought out that through. The one that does stand out is the elements, not so much the chapters. So it's which it puts a different flavour on the book. It's not yes, it's a book, but it's not so much of just a sit down and grab a cup of coffee and read. This is a business book, and it's for business leaders. So I think that's a good takeaway. So look, let's finish off. And no one's giving any comments, so they'll all watch this later on. They're probably all busy working. But let's finish off with sort of two takeaways. One is understanding the role of the CISO and if you need one. And then we're going to finish off the second part with that will be questions to ask during a board meeting. And I think what I'll do is I'll probably do a little bit of an edit, and we'll sort of do two takeaways out of this as to that can go with the book. So let's work on the CISO. And even with our sort of C-suite and CISO roundtables, we've changed that to cyber risk leaders, because you're right, people take, there's no longer a CISO role. A lot of the larger organisations will have a CISO. They're quite a unique group in their own right. But then you have others that might be a cybersecurity engineer or analyst, and they've been given the task of sort of implementing an enterprise-wide cybersecurity strategy. And I think they end up taking on a role of a CISO at the end of the day, and it's quite detailed. Maybe just talk us through the CISO role, how that's adapting, changing, escalating up to that C-suite. And then if you don't have a CISO, but you think you kind of need one, what's the way that you approach that problem?
Sure. Okay. And maybe I'll take this question, and I'll leave the key messages from the book to Anna. So from this book's perspective, we really want the board to understand a couple of things about having a dedicated security leader. The first one is your organisation needs someone, and whether or not that person is a frontline, very technical person or is a strategic thinking C-level executive really depends on the maturity of your organisation. It also depends on whether or not you're heavily regulated, and it potentially depends on your operating model as well as to whether or not you're using a lot of outsourced providers. But having someone in your organisation that looks after cyber means that those conversations are constantly being had. And where that person sits in the organisation is probably a conversation for another day, because there's lots of arguments around who security leaders should report to. Lots of them still report to an IT leader or a CIO. But essentially having that person in the business is incredibly important. And on the back of that, we don't want the board to meet that person for the first time during an incident. It really should be a relationship that's built over time and built on trust. And it's a conversation that we want to be constantly going on between the business and the board. If the board can understand who that person is, what they're there for, what keeps them awake at night, and then the board can start to, I guess, use that as a lens across other decisions they're making for the organisation. Certainly what I found, so I've been hiring CISOs for the last 5 years, and at varying levels in organisations and with various different titles. And what I found is that there's a few key things that drive an organisation to hire a person like this. So they might have an audit, they might have a breach. The board will say, I'm on another board, who's our cyber person? We've got a cyber person at the other organisation. Or the regulator may say, you need a responsible officer for security. And so there's this sort of driving force that is often put onto the organisation to say, we need to hire somebody. But then it's really important that you hire the right person who can help your organisation mature and to manage that risk. So we wanted a chapter in this book that helped the board to understand, who is this person? Do we need a C-level leader, or are we in a process of maturing towards that? And often I will hire a CISO in an organisation that's already got a security team, but they're evolving to that more strategic level away from the tactical, technical operations.
I think that's really important, the evolution. It's probably a good sign for the business when you start to, this sort of bubbles up to the top of who's managing our security and our cyber security. And that's also a key sort of consideration for the board, is where is the business going? particularly, and that's where COVID really played a part of suddenly everyone's remote working, and how secure is our network? And we've seen a massive rise up on ransomware. We covered that last week, almost a tripling effect on boards paying ransoms. So they haven't been prepared, and they've been left with little choice but to start to pay ransoms. Anna, another key sort of passion for mine is where security fits into an organisation, and I don't want to end up in a big debate here. We might even start some chats if we do sort of ask the right question. But where should cybersecurity fit as a security function? And there's always that divide between whether the CISO or cybersecurity should report to the CIO, or it should report directly to the CEO and be its own sort of business unit. How important, maybe that's, do you have a view on that, where cybersecurity should fit?
I certainly do, Chris.
Oh, good. Okay, I'll let you bring it on.
And it's sort of following on from what Claire has just shared, that I have similar views even around the CIO role.
Right.
So I'm quite passionate about the CIO role sitting on the executive. I think if a CIO role is reporting into a COO or a CFO nowadays, then it's really not giving technology as a whole, so digital, data and cyber, the lens that it deserves and needs. If we just focus on the security, the role of the security leader, I think today the logical place is still within IT, CIO. That may shift over time, but I definitely do think longer term, so it might be 5 years away, maybe 10 years away, I do actually see the security leader sitting on the chief executive's leadership team in the future, which I think is representing the business approach or the enterprise approach to security, rather than it being more of a technology type focus and function.
Well, I know, like, if you talk to the likes of Darren Kane, who has a chief security officer role, he's quite passionate in my discussions with him, is that, that security is across everything, because even cybersecurity now covers physical security, and all physical security these days is quite technology advanced, and the two have come together. And that's been my sort of advocacy over many years, is a security professional be sort of across all of that, as well as governance. They need to be across for that senior level role. So you do cover very well in terms of that CISO role, and I do encourage sort of the readers and the audience to look at that, and you break it down quite nicely. And maybe let's finish off with the questions that the board should be asking, or questions that should be getting raised at the board, and conversely, the red flags if they're not getting asked that might create. So maybe talk us through how a board meeting would be structured and what the board should be asking. If I'm a company director and I've got my CISO coming to our next meeting, what type of questions should I be asking, or the metrics I should be looking for?
I might make a start on that and then pass over to Claire. There's a question that I ask, and I'm often asked as an executive, and it does make me cringe, and I think it's a really good one. And that is, what's keeping you awake at night? And I really like that question because, first of all, it's an open-ended question. So it's really, you get a lot of insights from the answer that you get from that. So you can actually then assess whether the security leader is going to answer your question, or is worrying about things that are more technology focused, or whether they're actually demonstrating their ability to be thinking more broadly across the business and around those aspects around reputation, financial and regulatory implications. The other thing is that you can address the question to the CEO as well. So I think you can actually gauge as a board member the amount of buy-in and commitment that the CEO has to cyber, and then their understanding of cyber as well. The other one that's important for me, and I think it really needs more of a focus today, and we are in that shift, is what vendors or partners actually have access to your data. So as a board member, I'd be asking the question, who has access to our data? Where is it stored? What type of processes or governance have we got in place around vendor management, and making sure that our contracts have actually got expectations clearly set out around how a vendor is actually protecting that organisation's data. As in the event of a risk, customers aren't going to look at the provider around the breach. They're actually going to look at the customer, or the company that they're actually dealing with.
And Claire, I mentioned ransomware, and that's just kind of raised an issue, or a question for me is, do you happen to deal with those questions? Because and where companies should be, or their thought process on our systems are taken down, and our posture hasn't been very good, and we've been demanded a ransom to pay. What's the thoughts around that, and do you kind of address that here, or is this more of a preventative book? They should already know the answer.
No, I mean the thing about ransomware is that this shouldn't be a decision that gets made in the heat of a crisis. And Anna and I do talk in the book about the importance of scenario planning and running drills, and I know that they may seem like role plays that take a lot of time for boards to come together and do. But in the case of a crisis, it's actually really important that this sort of stuff is rehearsed. So if we were, or when we are, to be hit by a ransomware attack, who is the ultimate decision maker as to whether or not the ransom gets paid? And are we going to pay the ransom? And is that our policy? And you want to know that going into situations, because there are other risks on the risk register that those types of decisions are already made for. Organisations know their risk appetite for particular risks that might be financial, but when it comes to ransomware, which is also a financial decision to make for an organisation, a lot of organisations haven't really thought through, would we pay the ransom, would we not, and is that important? Now, I don't know if I want to give you my opinion as to whether or not people should pay them or not. But I honestly believe that it should be a decision that's not made in the heat of the moment. Like everything else, like meeting your CISO, like deciding who your third-party partners are, all of that should be done in a very calm environment where, it's a safe learning environment to know that, okay, if this was to happen, these are decision makers, this is what we would say to customers, these are parts of the network that we could segment off. Just knowing what you would do in the face of a crisis is really important. And we cover that at length in the book because we want to impress upon boards the importance of being part of that scenario planning.
The other one related to that just comes to mind. I'm sorry, I've sort of come up with questions as we go through, but cyber insurance has been another bugbear for both the industry. But from directors, they go, just get, it's a bit like their director insurance. Just go get some director insurance, covers us. And, cyber risk, okay, just go get some insurance. And a bit like fire insurance, saves us for a rainy day. Do you think boards are sufficiently addressing the issues around cybersecurity related insurance?
I'll let Anna weigh in as well, but I think insurance, any type of insurance, it can't be bought in isolation. So cyber insurance will only cover you for a finite amount of resources. And again, it doesn't make the decisions for you. It just provides you with some financial support and sometimes some services like forensics or uplifting the capability in your call center if you think that that's going to become a problem in the face of an incident. But at the end of the day, cyber insurance is one part of your risk appetite and how you're managing your risk. There are many other things that need to be done. And some organisations don't buy cyber insurance because they don't see the value in it and they don't really see the return on that investment should they have to draw down on it. The other thing I would say about cyber insurance is it's a relatively new product, maybe in the last decade. And because of that, there's not a lot of claims that have been made that insurers can refer to as sort of, case law in these cases. So obviously there's more and more organisations trying to claim on cyber insurance, but it's in some cases it's an unknown quantity. And I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
The only comment I'd make, and it's linking back to what you talked about before, Chris, and that's more around the size of the organisation and the budget available to them. If you're a not-for-profit or you're a small to medium business, sometimes you need to make the priority call on whether you're going to have your cyber insurance and pay for the policy, or whether you actually invest that money in other areas of uplifting your cyber maturity and even partnering with other organisations.
Yeah, sometimes it can, well, at least gets them thinking about it, on whether they need it and how at what stage they will need it too. As Claire pointed out, often it's the incident response is probably a good way to be, and then trying to prevent that claim in the first place. So look, that's it. We've gone. That was a nice, easy 45 minutes. We could go longer. I could literally, but we want the audience wanting more, so they go buy the book. It is available on the marketplace. Otherwise, it's available on Amazon. The publisher is Longville Media. And otherwise, Claire, maybe just a brief update on your podcast, The Security Collective, I believe?
Yeah, sure. So we're just about halfway through season 6, with the episodes coming out every Thursday. So we've got a few more episodes this season. The Security Collective, we rebranded, as you mentioned at the start, because the topics that we were starting to cover and that people were asking me for were much broader than my original topic, which was really around hiring and teams. We now talk much broader around workplace planning, and during COVID, obviously, we talked about how people have managed through that. And I try to get a lot of CISOs on to talk about how they've managed their teams, how they've maybe delivered particular projects. The last 2 weeks, we had a 2-part with Brendan Smith, who talked about cybersecurity awareness, some really great tips in yesterday's episode, actually, about how to take cyber awareness to the community in your organisation in a much better way than just annual compliance training. Anna's been on the podcast twice, and we've got another episode with her coming up next week in promoting the book. So encourage people to go back through the back catalogue and listen to Anna's episodes as well. So thanks, Chris, for the promotion of
no worries. I think I've got to update the logo on the marketplace. We have a little, like I call it the pod of podcasts. So anyone doing a podcast, or if you know a good podcast, let us know, and we'll put that onto the marketplace, and it gives you a little bit of a shopping there. And same with the books. There's plenty of books out there, and it's always nice to see a new security or cybersecurity book being released, and it just increases and contributes to the professionalism of our industry. So congratulations, both of you. It is a great achievement to get a book out, and like I said, 30 days is quite an achievement in itself. I'm a bit jealous. There's no excuse for anybody anymore if they can't write a book in 30 days. So look, just to finish off, like I said, we have 3 books to give away. It is listed on the MySecurity Marketplace. Just go to the resources. We have a bookstore there, and there's 2 quotes. Who are the quotes from? And email me the 2 names. Email us at promoteme@mysecuritymedia.com, and the first 3 responses will get a copy of the book. Otherwise, just go ahead and buy it. So thank you so much. I'll just give the Australian Cybersecurity Magazine one more plug. We are referenced there. I think there was 2, which I was really impressed with. This book is very well structured. This is like one of our live book reviews that we do. So please reach out and get a copy. And particularly, even if you are in a security role, but you think this will contribute to your board, or if you're a company director, do yourself a favour and get a copy of this book and start to read and educate yourself on this. So thank you again, Anna Leibel and Claire Pales, the Secure Board. Thank you very much, and congratulations on your book launch.
Thanks very much.
Thanks,
Great.
Chris.
Thank you. I'll let you go. Enjoy your day.
Bye.
Okay, very good. Let me just finish off as we do, and I'll put a link in the show notes, obviously, to that book, our report of the day, and it's a nice segue, actually. This is the SANS Security Awareness Report, Managing Human Cyber Risk. And the 3 sort of key takeaways here. Time, not budget, continues to be the top challenge that awareness programs face. According to the data, over 75% of security awareness professionals spend less than half their time on security awareness, implying awareness is too often less than a full-fledged effort. And organisations reporting program success by changing user behaviour had an average 2.5 full-time equivalent employees dedicated to awareness. A good episode that we had was with Alice White and her security training manager role with Atlassian. She talked about the security awareness program that they have. The other 2 points, majority of program leads are technical in nature, lacking soft skills such as communications and marketing, continues to limit organisations' ability to effectively engage their workforce. And then 3rd, strategic alignment is important. Awareness programs manage human risk. As such, security awareness should be an extension of the security team as opposed to being a part of and reporting to legal, audit, or human resources. So quite relevant there to the discussion we just had with Anna and Claire. If you want to know more, please check out the latest Cyber at Risk Leaders magazine. There's some 20 articles in there. We cover everything from SACE to space, and also the key cover article there, Why 5G Matters in a World of IoT, virtual reality, augmented reality, AI, and edge. So check that out. And also go to mysecuritytv.shop for a range of merchandise. We'll be back next Tuesday. We're going to look at the Q1 2021 market reviews for the video surveillance sector and the space and defence sector. We've got Dr. Chris Flaherty, who's going to be joining us, and one other guest for the video surveillance sector. Then we'll be breaking for Easter, and then we'll be returning on Tuesday, April the 6th. And I've got a guest from Israel, been looking at we'll be running an Israeli tech series. And I won't go into what we've got, but it's you can see through walls with this radar. So very interesting tech. We'll also continue with our Indo-Pacific series and our security consultant series. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, and thanks for joining us on our Tech and Sec Weekly.